Well, thanks everybody for coming out on a sunny and windy day. Perfect day to talk about renewable energy. We fueled, of course, both by wind and sun. So I think we set that up better than you could have imagined. My name is Rick Rosso. I run the India program here at CSIS. For those of you that aren't familiar with CSIS events, that also means that I, sharing duties somewhat with Sarah, are your designated safety officers. So should something go wrong today, we'll all meet and walk calmly outside the door, turn a left, and head over to the National Geographic Museum. But we're not expecting anything to go wrong today, and hopefully a lot of things to go right. So 5 years ago, Prime Minister Modi, elected to office, takes over, and I think, at least for a lot of Washington, he was a bit of an enigma. We studied him a bit as state leader of Gujarat. We knew certain things. We knew that he was an early adopter of renewable power in the state of Gujarat. We knew that as a state leader coming to office, he was talking about this notion of competitive federalism and cooperative federalism. So how can you work with state governments more effectively to meet India's national development objectives? These two things came together not long into his tenure when he announced this major commitment of 175 gigawatts of renewable power by the year 2022. Again, his own early adopter and belief in renewable energy, paired with his knowledge that state governments, of course, are going to be critical to meeting these kind of objectives. So as a former chief minister and a believer in renewable energy, really gave him the kind of gravitas to lead to this early commitment. Now, it's not the only power reform that has been initiated since Modi came in, of course. You've got the Uday Power Bailout Program. You've got oil and gas developments. You've got coal reforms. Subgaya trying to deliver electric power more widely across India. So a number of reforms that are happening simultaneously. It's great to have my good friend, Secretary Kumar here. Of course, he, having been served in the state government in Kerala, understands, too, extremely well on the role that states play and how they meet up with national objectives. So having somebody with his energy, dynamism, and knowledge taking over this important role as Secretary in the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, you couldn't have asked for a better advocate for this role at the time that India needed us most to meet this major commitment. So I'd like to welcome Secretary Kumar up to take the podium, and please help you join me in welcoming him to this back to CSIS. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg.
Yep. Cheers.
Okay, my term starts now. Thanks, Rick. Thank you, Sarah. I've been given a time limit of 15 minutes to conclude what I have to say. So that's why I kept the watch right next to me. All right, for India, climate change, fight against climate change and adoption of renewable power is a matter of faith and commitment. COP21, we undertook to reduce the carbon intensity of our GDP by 33 to 35% by 2030, considering 2005 levels. We also undertook to establish RE capacity of 40% by 2030. That is through the non-fossil fuels. 2015, we declared the ambitious goal of setting up 175 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity in the country, upscaling our target of 20 gigawatt. So from 20 gigawatt, we are going to establish 175 gigawatt. It was very ambitious, and today, as I speak, we have established 76 gigawatt, 23 gigawatt under various stages of implementation, another 27 gigawatt under various stages of tendering. So that makes it to 125, 50 gigawatt more to go by March 2020 to bid. When you talk about 76 gigawatt, it constitutes 22% of the capacity established today. If I add 45% of the large hydro, then it makes to 33% of the capacity as of today. If we go to 2020, 175, the RE capacity through small hydro, solar, wind, biomass, plus another 50 through large hydro, total capacity of around 525 gigawatt. Again, we would be there at around 33% of the capacity. So we are confident and comfortable that by 2030, we would be achieving the targeted capacity of 40%, more than 40%. In fact, we would be crossing 50% through the non-fossil fuels. We are not stopping at 2022, 175 gigawatt. By 2030, we would have a requirement of 850 gigawatt, of which 350 going to come from solar and 150 gigawatt through wind. That means a trajectory of establishing 30 gigawatt of solar every year and 10 gigawatt of wind every year. So this is how we are going to go. Today, we have a manufacturing solar photovoltaic cell capacity of around 3 gigawatt and 10 gigawatt of modules. But then we have to move ahead from here. And when we have to move ahead here, we would require a manufacturing capacity of 30 gigawatt in the solar cells. And we are now adopting the policies which would facilitate manufacturing of PV cells in India. We have brought out a tender which is manufacturing linked tender. So we are giving a sure market of 3 gigawatt provided the developer sets in manufacturing of 1.5 gigawatt here in the country. So we are facilitating manufacturing of PV cells. When we are talking about Make in India, we are not talking about only PV cells. When we talk about the wind sector, 80% of the wind equipment today is manufactured in India. And our endeavor is to enhance this percentage to 95% within next few years by 2022. Storage is key for success of RE sector, and so is for the electric vehicles. And we anticipate that by 2025, the storage prices are going to come down drastically, and it's going to make a huge difference to the RE sector. We are now concentrating on manufacturing and storage also. And that is by creating demand and also trying to bring in the phased manufacturing program for the storage, whether they're the battery cells or the battery packages. And that would be facilitated by both tariff and non-tariff barriers. So 175 gigawatt of demand by 2022, 500 gigawatt of RE demand by 2030, facilitating manufacturing in PV cells and modules, facilitating manufacturing and storage. We used to buy power through the feed-in tariff regime, and it used to be around 7-8 cents per unit. But then the getting capacity is not the idea. Getting capacity at affordable rate is the underlying thing. If I'm willing to give you a higher price, and if I'm going to buy power, if I suppose to today to try to, when the price is ruling for solar and wind at around 3.5 cents per unit, and if I'm willing to give it 5 cents per unit, then I can establish the capacity much earlier, maybe by 2021 or maybe by 2020. But the issue is not the speed at which you're going to install capacity. The issue is that you want to install capacity at affordable rates. So what India is trying to do is we are trying to provide energy access to the have-nots at affordable rates, at the rates at which the DISCOMs can buy. To integrate renewable energy into the main grid, we are establishing around 12,000 circuit kilometers of green corridors. We have identified areas which are rich in solar energy. We have identified areas which are rich in wind energy. And then we are planning out to evacuate power from these areas for integrating into the mainstream. If you see India, there are 7, 8 states which are rich in wind power. And if you see solar, not the insolation equal everywhere. There are solar-rich areas, and there are not so rich areas. So solar power and wind power is not equally distributed across the world, is not equally distributed across the country. But then the benefit of this power has to go to every person in the country per se. For the purpose, what we have done is we have allowed interstate transmission and losses free for all the states. If a state, Orissa wants to buy power, RE power, they can generate in Rajasthan, and they can have that power at the rate at which it is produced in Rajasthan without paying any transmission charge. So free ISTS charges is enabling instrument for distributing our RE power across the country. Various states in India had taken various paths for meeting their energy demands. They have certain assets, there are certain thermal assets, there are certain hydro assets. But now if they have to move to RE power, then who pays the cost of the standard assets? So we have to use the standard assets along with the RE assets in a very, very judicious and rational manner. Not all states require RE power. They are meeting their demand through the thermal power per se, as such today. But then, as I said earlier, for India, it's a matter of commitment and faith, adoption of RE power. So what the country has done is that we have made renewable energy purchase obligation. So every state has to buy a percentage of their share of the electricity consumed through RE component. So today, it is around 17%. So if your requirement is X, then 70% of the X has to come from RE power. And this keeps on increasing by the year. So RPO is an instrument for ensuring that all the states across the country adopt renewable energy. And to facilitate that, as I said earlier, we have made interstate transmission free across the country. In India, power is a concurrent subject. Both state government and the central government, they can legislate. Both states and federal government, they can have their own policies. The states have their own state electricity regulatory commissions, which regulate purchase of powers, which regulate supply of power. At the central level, we have got a Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. So both are quite independent, but at the same time, when federal government passes a law, that has to be adopted by the state government. Both, if RE power adoption has to be successful, both states and the center have to be an equal partner in that. Because the central government does not own land. Central government does not own resources. The land resources or the water resources they're owned by the state governments. So we have to make them partner if this has to be success. If a state is not following the RPO obligations, renewable purchase obligation, then there are certain penalties to that. But then some of the state governments do not comply with those penalties because SCRCs, the state electricity regulatory commissions, are regulated by the states per se. But then we have constant dialogue with the state governments, and then we persuade the state governments that they should align their vision with the vision of the federal government, and they should also align themselves with the commitment of the national government, and they should adopt the RE power with in line with the trajectory which has been given by the federal government. And I'm happy to share that most of the state governments are now complying with the trajectory which is given by the federal government in adoption of renewable energy. We have certain challenges. We have challenges regarding transmission. And again, the transmission cost is socialized across the states. But then, when it comes to the national commitment, everybody is willing to partner and then partner in the transmission cost as such. So we have the targets fixed. We want manufacturing to be done. We have the demand, and then we have the states. States having not so good solar or wind power, and some states having good solar and wind power, interstate transmission free, RPO obligation for them to adopt power, and then they becoming the partner. Now, when we talk about the RE power offtake or purchase of RE power, both state governments and federal government can do it on their own. But then, because the federal institutions has far better credibility, most of the developers sell their power to the federal institutions than the state institutions. But not all state institutions like this. Some of the states, their economy is robust, and then some of those developers also, like the state government of Gujarat, and the developers prefer Gujarat government as at par with the federal institution like Solar Energy Corporation of India. And if a bid has been put by the state government and the federal government, if the credit, if the credit security is equal, that par, then they get the equal rate. But in case they do not have a similar kind of credit insurance, then the rates which you get from the state is much lower than what you get from the federal government. So therefore, most of the states rely on the federal institutions to buy power. As I said earlier, we used to have feed-in regime, feed-in tariff, and feed-in tariff used to be costlier. So to bring the power affordable, we started undertaking the competitive bidding. And this competitive bidding started in February 2017. Earlier, before February 2017, the rate of per unit used to be around 6 cents. But after we introduced feed-in tariff, the bidding regime, the rates came down to around 3 cents per unit for both wind and solar. And now auctions, we have also started bringing the variability. Earlier we used to buy only solar power, standalone solar power. we used to buy standalone wind power. Then considering the CUF, we started now buying the hybrid power. So solar and wind hybrid. Subsequently, to create demand for storage, now we have started buying solar and storage hybrid power. And now we are moving towards solar, wind, storage, round-the-clock power. And this can be any kind of storage. And the latest in the auctions is that we are buying RE power along with the transmission. Our tender for the latest auction of generation clubbed with transmission is already out. We propose to buy 7,500 megawatt power from Leh and Kargil along with transmission up to state of Punjab or Haryana, and we want the developers to quote a price for that. So we are not only buying power, we are buying transmission also. And we are facilitating investment in RE sector. Earlier what we have said, you buy solar power, wind power, and transmission separately. Similarly, we have floated expression of interest for establishing the offshore wind project off the coast of Gujarat, where there will be 1 gigawatt of generation clubbed with transmission up to the shore. And we are hopeful that generation clubbed with transmission would be fairly affordable for us because, one, we will be getting investment from private sector, which will be at fairly low rate. Number two, there will be transparency. Number three, there will be competition among various bidders to give the lowest cost to us. In order to go along with the commitment of providing universal energy access at affordable rates to not only the have-nots in India, but the people who live without electricity, 1.2 billion people who live without electricity across the globe. India had mooted this initiative called International Solar Alliance. And I'm happy to inform you that today we have 73 countries who have signed ISA framework agreement and 41 countries who have ratified ISA framework agreement. The first assembly of ISA was held in October last year, and there India mooted a proposal that the membership of ISA should not be restricted between the tropics. Originally, the idea was the ISA shall be limited only to the 121 countries which lie fully or partially between the two tropics. But then, the benefit of solar energy, the solar power, should not be restricted. It should go worldwide. And that's how India mooted this amendment. And this amendment was accepted by the first assembly of ISA. And now it is becoming a global initiative. And the benefit of this global initiative shall be passing on to every citizen of the world. Our Prime Minister has given, let me see. Yes, just 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes. Our Prime Minister gave an idea. One world, one sun, one grid. The sun is everywhere around the globe 24 hours. And if there's a difference of 15 degrees in longitude, it can save you 1 hour of storage. So one sun, one world, one sun, one grid. This can assist in saving the cost on storage and also on doing the peak shaving in the regions which follow subsequently. Like Oman can peak shave energy requirement of India, and India can peak shave power requirement of Thailand, and so on and so forth. So one world, one sun, one grid is the principle now we are working on. Number one, to reduce the cost of storage. Number two, to make the sun power available to all the members of the world, without enhancing the cost. And lastly, we are not only talking about the grid solutions. We are talking also about off-grid solutions. We are committed to de-dieselization of farm sector. We are going to supply 2.75 million pumps to our farmers. We are also facilitating creation of solar farming, solar farming on barren land of the capacity of 500 kilowatt to 200 megawatt tail-end solar farms, which will be connected to 11 kV to 33 kV stations. We are also committed to solar cooking. In fact, we have introduced solar cooking in 2 other villages in India, where it is not the thermal cooking per se, but it is PV solar connected with the induction cooking. And through clean cooking, what we want to be able to send is strong signal for the health of women. We want to reduce the drudgery of women. And these cooking systems are going to work for 25 years. So people don't have to go and hunt for the firewood. It will save the health of women, and it will save the pollution. And then we are also utilizing the solar thermal and helping the states in meeting their cooling needs, in meeting their drying needs, in meeting their large-scale cooking needs. And in fact, if I can share one example for the chilling of the milk. So we are trying to pass on the benefits of the solar energy, the RE energy, through the grid connected, off-grid connected, and through the energy means. So lastly, to share one example of solar drying in the hilly region of Jammu and Kashmir. If you dry apricots and apples in the open sun, they can have the fungal attacks. It takes far more time to dry. But if you use the solar thermal equipment, then the drying is faster. It is hygienic, and the producer gets a better price. So friends, lastly, I would say that our commitment remains for saving the environment. Our commitment remains for fighting against the climate change. Our commitment remains for adoption of renewable energy. Our commitment remains for providing universal energy access. Our commitment remains to provide universal energy access, not only the people of India, but all the people of the globe at affordable rates. We are willing to cooperate with all the stakeholders and be successful in this mission to provide happiness to every citizen of the globe. Thank you very much.
Okay, Secretary Kumar, can you hear this okay? Okay. So the first challenge we're going to hand you is the fact that our microphones aren't working, the ones pinned to us. So you get an accessory just like mine.
So I can get rid of this.
You can get rid of that, yes. Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm Sarah Ladislaw, Senior Vice President and Director of the Energy Program here at CSIS. It is just such a pleasure to have you back here. I just wanted to add my thanks and my welcome to Rick's at the top of the conversation. We could have given you 30 to 45 minutes because I think you have so much detail to unpack. It's always a real inspiration to me. I come at this from a different perspective than Rick does. Rick is a specialist in India. I look at energy around the world, right? And I can't help but think, just back to 10 years ago, the conversation we were having about India's aspirations in terms of, how we were going to meet the needs of a developing economy like India and what some of the goals are and the targets are that you've come out in the interim, and the kind of change that we've seen over a very, very short period of time is really inspirational. And it's important for all of us, as we sort of look out into the future of energy trends, to look and see and learn about what's going on in India and realize that it is, in fact, the future of the energy system. And so I always learn a lot from what's going on in your work. What I'd like to do in our conversation before we open it up, because I know we have lots of informed people in the audience who would like to ask some questions, is maybe cover a couple different things. One, I'm really impressed with the importance of your vision, because it's not just a vision for India, it's a vision for the role that India is going to play in the global economy. Two, I'd like to talk about the similarities that I see between what's happening here in the United States and what's happening in India. I think we have some very similar challenges in some ways. And then three, really just to help, because it's such a complex patchwork of things that's going on, maybe help answer some questions that I think maybe people here might have about understanding, particularly the role of, as you said, the equal partnership between the center state and the states in India. First, on your vision, one of the things that you started off with is the importance of your commitment to the Paris targets. And in a lot of my work, there's a lot of concern that the global commitment to Paris has somehow waned, not necessarily because of the political commitment of different countries, but because the realization that the target is so hard to achieve. Over the period of time that you've made this commitment, do you think that you've become more or less optimistic about your ability to meet those targets? And how do you think about the next time you go back to the Paris climate or the next UNFCCC conversation, what you're able to sort of talk about what you've achieved?
Thank you, Sarah. At the time when we talked about this 75 gigawatt of target, there was a lot of doubt in minds of people that whether we would be able to achieve it or not. Mm-hmm. And we have been a little fortunate because the technology has been advancing, the efficiency of solar cells have been increasing, the prices have been coming down. Mm-hmm. So high ambition and high optimism, coupled with the good luck, I think luck has been on our side. We would be able to achieve 175 gigawatt. In fact, not only will achieve 175 gigawatt, we would be exceeding the target. Mm-hmm. And as I said, that when you're talking about 175 gigawatt, this does not include large hydro, which is considered a renewable power today. Mm-hmm. And once we include 45 gigawatt, which we have already established, plus 76 gigawatt through the other sources, we are already at 33%. And by 2030, we are sure that we would be having our electric capacity through the non-fossil fuel sources, not of 40%, but more than 50%. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And what do you say, because you mentioned making the transition from scaling quickly to scaling affordably. And in a lot of places around the world, the idea that solar costs were coming down so rapidly, but now, how much more cost decline can we expect? We've got lots of concern over, trade restrictions against cheap Chinese solar panels. This is something that we've been talking about here in the U.S. Does scaling affordably mean doing it slower?
Right. I'm just talking about our own experience that we could have gone a rapid pace for establishing RE power had we been willing to pay a higher price. Mm-hmm. Because we have earlier the feed-in regime tariff, and then tariff regime, feed-in tariff regime, and then subsequently we moved on to bidding. Mm-hmm. And when we moved on to bidding, it took us some time to establish this bidding regime per se, and then ensure that all the bids come transparently. And then we get the right kind of price, which is affordable to discoms. And today, if I say that introduce feed-in tariff regime, and I say, okay, I am willing to buy power at the rate of 5 cents or 6 cents, most of the developers would be willing to come and set up their generation capacity. But what I have to do is I have to draw a balance between affordability of power. Number two, the kind of transmission capacity I have. And the third, the demand which I have today and which I'm going to create. So I have to balance everything as I move forward in integrating RE into the main power sector.
And integrating renewables into an electric power system is one of the key themes of the International Energy Agency's World Energy Outlook. Fatih Birol will be here this week to talk about this. And so it's a challenge that every single country is facing, which is how do you do that? I think one of the challenges that we face here in the United States that's quite similar is that sometimes for utilities, integrating renewables has a loss of value proposition, right?
Sure.
And so how much of that have you experienced, and what have been some of the strategies at the center and at the state level that you've used to try and overcome that?
We have been very conscious of the fact that the renewable energy we produce is properly integrated into the main system. We do forecasting and scheduling. We also have renewable energy management centers. We are also building around 20,000 circuit kilometers of green corridors. We have got ambitious program of enhancing, going into phase 2 of setting up another 10,000 circuit kilometers of green corridors across the states, and then that will be fed into the phase 3. But then what we first are locating the potential areas of solar power and wind power. What is the generation capacity? Suppose from X place I can have 40 gigawatt. How do I evacuate that power and put it in the main grid? So what we are trying to do is we are trying to establish renewable energy parks. We are calculating the resource that can be generated from there. And then we are planning the evacuation so that the generation and evacuation takes place simultaneously. I cannot have generation today and transmission tomorrow. So they have to be, if I have to have the optimal use of resources, then both should come together. So we are doing meticulous planning for creation of generation and also transmission together.
And what about, you had mentioned when people are developing projects or buying projects, they're very willing to do it from the center, but not always necessarily from the state level. I mean, there were some sort of press reports and industry reports about renegotiations of contracts or delays and those sorts of things happening at the state level. Is that still happening, or do you think that was just sort of a growing pain scenario?
Okay, let me take the second part first. As for the power purchase agreements and the contractual obligations are concerned, they are sacrosanct. We are very clear in our mind, both the federal government and the state governments. The contractual agreements, once entered into, can't be altered. So we would respect the contracts, one. Number two, whereas talking about the rates, it depends on the credit rating of an institution. Certain of the states do not have credit rating as the federal institutions have. So when we call for the bids for purchasing power, the central institution get better rate than the state institutions because of credit rating.
Sure.
And also for the payment security, what they're going to get. And that's why most of the states prefer to buy power through the central mechanism.
Maybe to back up a second, because I think one of the things that I'm always impressed with is there's a huge number of policy goals and things coming from the center, and you talked about sort of this equal partnership between the center and the states. What do you think is the most powerful incentives and sort of ways in which you've so far worked with the states to get them to implement the kinds of policies you want them to?
The two key factors which have been instrumental in success of renewable energy adoption in the country. One, we have made interstate transmission free.
Yeah.
Because we want to pass the benefit of solarization and wind power to all the states of the country and not restrict it to few. So if I'm in the northeast of states, I can still put a project in the west of the country and draw benefit out of it. So this is the first instrument, IST as being free. And second is the renewable purchase obligation. So if we are using X amount of power, certain percentage has to be from the RE power. And that has been made obligatory. And that's why I said for India, adoption of renewable power is a matter of commitment, faith. And that's how these two, these two policy decisions have made us go ahead fairly rapidly in RE sector.
And changing the financial incentives for some of the states, utilities, and discoms is also a really important part. I mean, at least it is an important part here as utilities try to envision a world where they're not only the sellers of renewable power, but they're also purchasers of renewable power to the extent that you have distributed energy resources in your state.
Yes, unless the district utilities or the state utilities become a partner in the RE growth, you cannot succeed. And in fact, for faster adoption of rooftop solar, now we have planned a policy of giving some incentive to the state discoms. And because the higher the growth they show in adoption of solar rooftop, the more incentive they get.
Sure.
And similarly, when we are going to implement this tail-end solar farming scheme, so there also we are incentivizing the discoms to purchase power from the farmers, because they are going to purchase power from the farmers at a higher rate. Then they are going to then they are going to purchase power from the large-scale RE projects. So they have to be compensated. And since they have to be compensated, we are giving some incentives to the discoms. So they are being made partner in implementing the policies what we are contemplating through the federal government.
Can you talk a little bit more about what you've seen or what you've learned in your efforts to promote things like rooftop solar? I mean, I think what you've just mentioned are some of the ways in which you've found ways for discoms in particular to find it in their interest and not against their interest to promote things like that. But what other sort of innovations and thinking along the lines of rooftop solar for you guys?
Rooftop solar, if you, rightly you said that, because there has been, we have been facing a little bit of opposition from discoms in adoption of solar power, because in India, the residential sector power supply is highly subsidized.
Yeah.
And they are subsidized at the cost of commercial and industrial customers. So if a residential sector, if for the residential sector we are supplying power at 3 rupees, for commercial and industrial people is being supplied at 8 or 9 or 10 rupees. And so they are cross-subsidizing. And as the rooftop solar has started making commercial sense, more commercial and industrial sectors have started going for solar power. And discoms do not want them to go, because if they let them go, then how they're going to subsidize the residential sector.
Right.
So there's a huge opposition from that sector. So what we are trying to do is and biggest subsidy goes to the farm sector. For power supply for the farm sector. So what we have started doing is, first we want to make farm sector independent of the discoms. We want farm sector to have their own captive power. And that's precisely what we have introduced. Our cabinet has approved, our government has approved a scheme last week through which we will be supplying 2.75 million pumps. Out of which 1 million would be grid connected and 1.75 million would be off-grid connected. And these pumps would enable farm sector or the farmers to have captive power. So they can use power by producing their own power. And wherever the grid connect is there, they can sell the additional power to the grid. And when a farmer is selling additional power to the grid, he is conserving water. And once you have the captive power for the farm sector, then the DISCOMs need not give subsidy to the farmers. And if they need not give subsidy to the farmers, they do not charge commercial and the industrial customer at a higher rate. So it's a win-win situation. So that's how we're concentrating on de-dieselization and supporting farm sector for their for producing power for their captive use. And then we also want to strengthen the income of the farmers, because this has always been a concern. People have barren land, uncultivable land, where they cannot do anything. But once they can produce solar, once they can do solar farming or RE farming, they can put their windmill also there. And when they can do RE farming in uncultivable land, they not only earn money from there, but they can also help in strengthening the grid by tail end production and also supporting the local supply of power.
That's interesting. So you focused on transmission lines before, which I can't begin to tell you the problems we have with siting transmission lines in the United States. So we need some corridors like the ones you're making. But one of the other pieces of enabling a more renewable energy integrated grid is sort of local transmission infrastructure as well.
Sure.
And part of the UDE reform scheme was to reduce the technical and commercial losses. Can you talk a little bit about progress that's been made on that front? Because I do think it's important about trying to figure out whether we're going to be able to have the proper sort of more localized grid networks that can sort of speak to each other in more sophisticated ways as we go forward.
Under the Government of India's Saubhagya scheme, by the end of next month, each and every household of India would be connected by electric power, would get electric power. It could be grid connected, it could be off-grid. And when I talk about off-grid, I'm talking about the mini-grids and micro-grids and standalone power systems, where you just give to individual household solar panels, and where they can have few bulbs and fan and a television run from the solar power with support of storage, the required storage. So every household is going to be electrified by the end of the next month. In fact, we are not going to wait even at the end of the next month. We are going to achieve this target much before that.
Oh, great. Do you want to announce it here? No. Just kidding. So one of the other questions that I had, just went out of my mind, was something that I have been reading about it a little more in the sort of energy wonk news, but this basic idea that India is starting to think about wholesale power market reform. The Central Electric CERC Regulatory Commission, thinking about the way in which electric power is sold sort of across the country, away from sort of the more constrained PPA price discovery mechanism, more of a market-oriented mechanism. Is that something that you think about very much, or what your expectations would be for the ability of that kind of like wholesale power market structure to enable DISCOMs, which traditionally sort of utilize the resources that they have based on a power purchase arrangement, long-term contract, and be a little bit more flexible in terms of buying from a least cost resource that's available more in a more timely fashion?
What we are contemplating is that every DISCOM should be able to supply 24/7 power to the consumers. And they should make sufficient arrangements of purchasing that quantum of power. And if they are unable to supply 24/7, then there should be penal action against the supplier. And so this is one. Number two, it would be depending on it is up to the individual DISCOMs to buy power from where they like, because we cannot dictate that you have to buy power from X place or Y place. And even today, when we are doing renewable energy purchase through the federal mechanism, which is the Solar Energy Corporation of India or National Thermal Power Corporation, we get demand from the states. I do not purchase power unless there is a demand from the state.
Sure, yeah.
So states demand, there is a demand. They say, okay, I want 2,000 megawatt of wind power. And then I procure that power on behalf of the state and supply it to the state. And the federal government institution, they keep 7 paisa a margin to ensure that the payment towards the payment security mechanism, because the federal government institutions have to pay pay money to the developer in time, and so they have to have some money kept for them. So this is how it is. So we do a power purchase agreement, and we also at the same time do power supply agreement. So the discounts will be free to buy power from anywhere they like.
Okay, great. Before I open it up for questions,
And the last thing I said, sorry, the states, it's not, the states can generate power on their own.
Yeah.
And suppose the state government of Gujarat let me give an example of state government of Gujarat or state government of Rajasthan, which are both rich in solar power and wind power. So if they want to develop their resources for supplying power for their own state use, or to supply that power for any other state, they're free to do so. They can do it on their own.
Sure, yeah.
And in case they want to do it through the federal mechanism, they can adopt that also. And lastly, I would like to inform you that initially we used to do the solar power or the wind power or RE power when it used to be costlier. We used to do bundling of RE power with thermal power. But now we have started bundling thermal power with RE power, because RE power has become cheaper.
Yeah, yeah.
And so we are using our thermal assets to support RE.
It's a very changed world, isn't it?
Very changed world.
It is. Yeah, yeah. One of the things that I think Rick won't invite me back again if I don't ask this question. So before we go to the audience for their questions, which you should be thinking about, is what are the ways in which you've interacted with U.S. states and entities that have been helpful to you in what you're trying to do? And are there areas where we can help to strengthen cooperation, either in sort of learning from the experiences that you've had, or tapping into some of the talents and experiences here as well?
Oh, we have been running a very successful U.S. India strategic energy program. And in fact, our collaborative efforts have been on since the year 2005. And last year, we developed into strategic energy program 2017, under which we have various pillars of energy, RE power being one, then coal being another one, and the oil sector being another one. So we got different pillars collaboration going on, and we had a meeting of RE pillar this morning. And we would like to, and in fact, the collaboration between US and India have borne very successful, and it has resulted in very successful outcomes. And we would like to collaborate with the U.S. authorities, with the U.S. institutions, for enhancing research and development, for development of the next generation solar cells, for development of solar cells with higher efficiency. We would like to collaborate with them in the area of storage, in the area of battery manufacturing, may it be lithium ion or sodium sulfur, or may it be research on inverters or the string inverters. And we have been also exchanging our best practices, may that be in the area of rooftop or payment security mechanism or integration of grid, the smart grid per se. And in fact, there's a huge, vast spectrum on which the collaborative actions is taking place, and in fact, is helping both the nations. And not the least, with the growth of RE sector in India, and India being a huge market for renewable energy. A lot of American companies have come and set up
Absolutely.
They're working there, may it be manufacturers or may they be developers, and a whole lot of funds, the U.S. funds, have supported the growth of renewable energy in India. So, what we have said is that India is a huge market. We want to develop a huge base of manufacturing, may it be solar cells, may it be solar modules, may it be wind equipment, may it be any other equipment for the waste to energy or biomass or the small hydro, and we would like U.S. companies to come and start their operations, and we partner in Make in India, and not only Make in India to meet the demands of Indian market, but also to export to Southeast Asia, Asian nations, and Africa. So India's geographical location advantage can be used for supplying across the world.
Yeah, that's great. Well, if one thing I've learned in spades since starting to work with Rick and his team on relationships between India and the United States on energy is just the sheer amount of appetite from U.S. universities, U.S. innovators, U.S. industry, U.S. governments at all levels in doing more of that kind of collaboration. So I think it's a very fruitful area to go. Okay. I'm going to stop monopolizing his time, and we'll take a first question. We have 3 ground rules. Just wait for a mic, state your name and affiliation, and question in the form of a question, please.
Hi, thank you, madam. Thank you. I'm Raghuveer Goyal. I'm a journalist in the White House for India, Globe, and Asia Today. My question is 3-part question. First of all, I just came back from India from a week-long trip, very short. India have changed in many ways, including pollution and energy, as far as Delhi is concerned. Other states I couldn't visit this time. My question is 3-part. One, during this visit, Mr. Secretary, if you have signed any agreement with the U.S. government or U.S. Companies. Second, how much hurdle you have with the states or politics where the ruling party is not there to achieve your goals as far as energy reaching to the people there. And finally, how much energy are we importing today with all the engineers and scientists we produced in India? Why we are not self-sufficient other than oil or import? Thank you.
All right. Let me answer you the last question first. If you're talking about the petroleum products, energy means not the electricity. And as far as the electricity is concerned, we are self-sufficient. We are not importing electricity. So we have our electric generation and control. We totally cater to the country's demand. And as far as petroleum products are concerned, obviously we import petroleum products for the use in the transportation sector and otherwise. But as the electric vehicles will kick in, and as the renewable energy generation would enhance and expand, our dependence on the petroleum products import would come down. Number 2, you said that what kind of opposition we find from the states. There is no opposition from the state. It is just that they have their own assets which they have created over past, the thermal assets. So what we have to do is we have to start balancing the use of those assets with the renewable power, because we cannot say that we cannot shut down all our thermal assets overnight. So they have to be gradual. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to increase the use of RE power, and we are trying to reduce the use of thermal power. And today the thermal power plants can be, we can reduce their efficiency by around 50%, and then we can use, so we can bring the efficiency down, and then we can ramp up and ramp down the use of thermal power plants, and then then integrate RE energy to that. The last thing you said that any agreement. This is I had a very successful meeting with Undersecretary of the State, Mr. Mark Menzies, and we have identified new areas for collaboration in research and development sector. We are going to primarily work in the area of storage, because storage is going to be key for both success of electric vehicles and renewable energy per se. You know that renewable energy is intermittent, it's not firm, and if we have to firm up this power, we need storage, or we need backup power in form of hydro or a gas or this. So we are going to work on storage, we are going to work on ancillaries like inverters, we are going to work on development of solar cells, next generation solar cells, and we are also going to expand the collaboration between the US companies and the Indian companies to make in India success, and not only for the Indian market but also for export to the South Asian region and Africa.
That's great. Okay. Additional questions? Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Dhruv. I'm a student at Georgetown University. My question is, in the context of the 2015 denationalization of the coal industry and the auctioning off of coal fields in India, what role do you think that the private sector could potentially play in the renewable energy sector in India in the coming future?
Sorry, I couldn't catch your question.
So I'm saying in the context of the denationalization of coal industries in India, what similar role do you think the private sector could play in the renewable energy industry in India?
Today, renewable energy sector is majorly driven by the private sector investment, and we have been able to establish 76 gigawatt of RE capacity, mostly through private investment. And as we grow the target of 175 gigawatt, not only generation, but now we are going generation plus transmission. Generation plus transmission plus storage plus for round-the-clock power. So this whole thing is going to be driven by the private sector. So we are now facilitating investment of foreign funds, maybe the pension funds or other government funds in Indian sector. And today, almost all global funds have invested in India, in India's RE sector. Mm-hmm. So it will be driven by the private sector, one. Number two, the coal, for quite some time, is going to play a critical role in success of RE sector, because somebody has to give the base power, and that base power has to come from the thermal. Mm-hmm. You cannot write off your thermal facilities all of a sudden. You have to gradually reduce dependence on your thermal assets. So they are going to be in use. They will keep on. We will keep on using them for quite some time till storage becomes affordable, mm-hmm. and storage started making sense. So thermal will be critical. Thermal will be used, and it will be gradually tapered off.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, sir.
Hi, I'm Srikanth. I'm from Energetics, a federal contractor. You spoke about dieselization of the farm sector. But when you look at the residential and the commercial sector, the pollution generated by the standby diesel generators is quite significant. So what measures the government is taking to de-dieselize the standby generators in rest of the country? I believe they have been banned in Delhi, but in other tier 1 and tier 2 cities. And second part of the question is, it'll be great if you can speak about, you spoke about the wind sector, but if you can talk about what specific impetus India is giving to offshore wind.
All right. If I have heard you right, first question you asked me about de-dieselization of the farm sector, right? of the farm sector. Right. Diesel is a major pollutant, and it also costs farmer a huge sum when you compare to RE power. We have already established or given or provided 200,000 solar pumps to the farmers in the country. Seeing the benefit of the solar pumps, whether offshore or grid connected. If we talk, off grid, I'm not offshore, off grid. If you talk about off grid solar pumps, farmer gets captive power. He doesn't use diesel. The cost of power is far less. He doesn't have to bring diesel over and over again. We save on foreign exchange for the import of petroleum products, and the farmer can use captive power not only for irrigation but also for other uses in the farm sector. So we are going to provide, in addition to 200,000 what we have done, 1.75 million pumps over the next 4 years to the farmers in off-grid manner. 30% of the cost would come as subsidy from the central government. 30% would come from the state government as subsidy. 30% would come as loan, and 10% of the cost would have to be paid by the farmer. When you talk about grid connected solar pump, same formulation continues for support. 30% subsidy from central, 30% subsidy from the state government, 30% loan, 10% farmers' contribution. But here the advantage is that he can export excess power to the grid and earn an additional income. And when he's earning additional income by export of surplus power, he would be conserving water. And then, by conserving water, he is also using his captive power, and we would be stopping the other subsidies per se. So as I said earlier, it's a win-win situation for everyone. We are doing the de-dieselization of the farm sector. One, we are going to enable the farmer to have a captive power for his own use whenever he wants during the daytime. Today what happens in India, sometimes the current comes in the evening. When the power comes in the evening, the farmer has to go in the night and do irrigation for his farm. But here, the farmer won't have to get up in the night and go for irrigating his farmland. So he can do it during the daytime. And then these are all tail-end applications which will strengthen the grid. So this is one. Number two, off-grid, offshore. We would be requiring around 850 gigawatt of power by 2030, considering a growth rate of 6.5% per annum. And today, India uses around 1/3 of global average in electricity consumption. Just imagine when every household which you are going to do is going to be electrified. Just imagine when electric vehicles will move in and kick in India. The demand is going to surge. And if this demand is going to surge, and if we double our consumption level, then we would require around 1,700 gigawatt of the thing, gigawatt of power. And 1,700 gigawatt of power would not come from the traditional renewable sources, that is the wind energy and the solar energy or hybrid. We have to go to the non-conventional renewable energy sources like offshore wind. And we have identified a potential of 70 gigawatt off the coast of Gujarat and off the coast of Tamil Nadu. And we are trying to experiment if we're going to harness these new resources right from the beginning. And we are going to make our investment in the first offshore farm this year. And we have brought in the expression of interest for establishing first project of 1 gigawatt off the coast of Gujarat. And the transmission will take place to Gujarat, and Gujarat government has already agreed to buy the complete power, the total power generated from this project.
Hi, I'm Lori Aniti from the Energy and Information Administration of DOE, and we're working on a new electricity model for the International Energy Outlook, and so we try to forecast, what the energy is going to be, energy market's going to be for the future around the world. And I have a couple of questions. You have some, really lofty goals for renewable energy over the next couple of years. And, for solar, you have this thing where, yes, the prices of solar panels have gone down, but then you instituted tariffs so that you could get your, get your local markets making their own solar panels. So I'm wondering, and then in order to get the goal, you really have to put out a lot of tenders, and you have to have a lot of bidders, and you also want the tariffs or the rates to be low at a certain rate. So there's all this going on, and I'm just wondering, what's more important of all those goals? Is it more important to get the local market of making solar panels underway, at the risk of slowing down those goals? Is it more important to get to the goals? I'm just wondering, what are the priorities?
All right.
All of the above.
All right. I admit today most of our solar cells and modules are being imported. For us, it's very important to have Make in India. And we would like to have solar cells and modules manufactured in India, not only for meeting our own demand, but also meeting demands of other countries. And this can be done when you have to have the economy of scale, when you have the demand aggregation. So we are enhancing the demand. We are doing the demand aggregation, and we are bringing the new policies for facilitating manufacturing in India. In fact, we have just bring out a tender that the manufacturing link tender of 3 gigawatt. We give you 3 gigawatt of assured market, provided you set up manufacturing of 1.5 gigawatt of solar cells and modules in the country. So these are manufacturing link tender, one. Number two, we have set our own standards that anybody who's going to supply solar cells and modules for Indian projects, they have to meet that standards. And if they don't meet those standards, then they will not be allowed to supply those projects. So we are working on our own policies, working through our own tariff, non-tariff instruments. But yes, we are committed for manufacturing in India, and we would like to meet our own demand, and we won't like to be dependent on somebody else for my own energy security.
So even if that slows down the development of solar, you'd rather focus. In other words, even if people can't finance these projects at a low enough tariff while they're making their own solar panels, so that might lower the amount of solar energy that gets produced or that gets built. So it's more important to go slow then and make sure that you learn how to produce your own panels. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
So I think the question is, and we grapple with this here too, which is how do you create a domestic solar manufacturing industry that's cost competitive with what you would have imported? The presumption is that at some point when you initially put a tariff, raise a tariff on what you're importing, is that until you come up to scale, can produce at that cost, then you're going to have a period of slowdown just because of that differential. Do you accept that premise, or do you think you won't see a slowdown as a result of the manufacturing incentive? Is it sequenced in such a way that you don't think you'll experience that, or are you willing to accept the slowdown by virtue of creating that sector?
No, I would agree with you. We won't be slowing down our process of deployment of solar energy. Mm-hmm. One, we would ensure through the standards that only those solar cells and modules are put in Indian projects which meet the standards and which do not degrade faster than what it should be. And in fact, there were a couple of complaints which have been received in the country that people are using substandard cells and modules, and they are going to degrade much faster than their life of 25 years. So that we are taking care through the standards which we have brought in. One. Number two, we are also now enhancing the scale to ensure that the cost of production in India is at par with the global production rate. Number three, the solar cell technology is fast evolving. And people try to recover the cost of technology within 3 to 4 years. And now the new generation solar cells are coming. So we as a country can catch on the technology curve and be globally competitive. So our policy is to be globally competitive, catch on the technology curve, and not only cater to the Indian demand, but also cater to the global demand. And till that date, I'm committed to protect my domestic industry. In fact, we have brought in the latest scheme of 12,000 megawatt. It's called the government producer scheme. The energy, RE power, the solar power would be produced by the government entities and for the government use. So if you produce a product through the government entity for the government use, is WTO compliant. So I'm going to give a protected market to my institutions, and I would secure that whatever is being produced by the domestic manufacturers is utilized here in my own country. And for that, I'm willing to give them some incentive, which we have already provided up to 70 lakh per megawatt for 12,000 megawatt under the scheme. So this government producer scheme, which the government has approved recently, would protect the Indian market. So what I'm trying to say is that yes, at one hand, we are trying to protect the domestic manufacturers who are existing now in the market. Number two, we are going to put the standards to ensure that only quality goods come in. We are going to have the non-tariff barriers to ensure that Make in India succeeds. We are going to have the right kind of partnerships with the companies which are willing to come and start manufacturing in India. And at the same time, while I am enhancing my manufacturing base, I will keep on importing from the sources at the rate considering which I can get affordable power for my discoms.
Great, that was great. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you. My name is Babu Ram, and in short time, you have given the whole of India in 15 minutes time, RE sector and energy sector. So it is very impressive, and congratulations. My question is a little bit about geographical spread of the renewable energy development in India. In particular, I'm interested to know about the developments in the northeast of India vis-a-vis the other plains, other states in India. And suppose if they are trailing behind other states, then what policies, what special instruments and packages you have in mind to make them come forward and compete with other states in India? Thank you very much.
As I said earlier, all states, all countries, all geographical locations do not have similar insulation or wind power. It depends and it varies from area to area. Like in India, we have got 7, 8 states in which we have got viable wind power to harness wind energy. I'm talking about the large wind power, not the small wind, and which can be harnessed at a commercial viable rate or economical viable rate. Similarly, the solar insolation also varies from state to state. In Rajasthan, Gujarat, Telangana, in Andhra Pradesh, in Tamil Nadu, they are high in Jammu and Kashmir, in Madhya Pradesh, they are higher insolation area. But if you see northeast, it rains quite a bit in northeast, and insolation is not very high. One. Number two, they do not have the flat land. Because if you have to put solar projects, your solar panels have to face the south or southwest. So you have the limitations of geography out there. But nevertheless, they have small hydro. So what we are trying to do for the Northeast, we are trying to harness small hydro and provide RE power through small hydro, one. Number two, to meet their demand of electricity power, they can buy renewable power through renewable energy power through the projects established in other states, for which we have interstate transmission free. So if I'm in Mizoram, and if I got a requirement of 500 megawatt, I will tell Solar Energy Corporation of India that I require 500 megawatt. Please give me the best rate. Solar Energy Corporation of India brings out a bid, and he says 500 megawatt for Mizoram. So somebody in Rajasthan says, okay, I'll develop this project of 500 megawatt. I'll give you a rate of 2.5 or 2.44, and that Mizoram government gets the solar energy from the resource which is in Rajasthan at 2.44. So what we are trying to do is, we are trying to use national resources for the national good. And the benefits we want to percolate to each state and every individual of the country.
Great. Another question. Yes, ma'am.
To pick up on that point, so where do you see a role for mini renewable grids at all in the rural areas, and are they being encouraged or not encouraged? I mean, and if so, who is doing them? Is it being done at the district level? Is it being done at the state, deciding that a certain area, a mini grid makes sense? Is it being done at the panchayat level? I just want to know what the policy is on and how they fit into the picture.
Sorry.
How do mini grids and microgrids fit into the policy structure? Who's doing them? Who's in charge of deciding where they go?
All right. I know, as I said, that the government, under the Saubhagya scheme, has committed itself to electrify each and every household. And under that scheme, we have established mini grids and microgrids in various regions of the country. So it's not only the government, but it's also the private sector. In many places, private sector has gone and set up their mini grids and microgrids, and they find one prime user around a cluster of houses, and then they use other sub-users in the village or in the locality, and they provide power there. So we are so there are many mini grids, microgrids, and independent household RE solutions which have been provided in India. In fact, the standalone solar systems are very popular. We give solar panels. It is backed by a small storage, and then in the household they light up 4 lamps, 1 fan, and 1 television, and 1 refrigerator. So there are standalone solutions also. So there's mini grids, microgrids, standalone solutions. So everything is working. And I said that recently what we have started doing is, we have started giving the clean cooking solutions also. In fact, for the first time, we have provided clean cooking systems to 200 families in 2 villages, one in Madhya Pradesh and another in Andaman and Nicobar Island. So what we've given is we have given solar panels of 800 watt and plus an induction stove. So and then we've given some storage with that. So now the household won't have to depend on collecting the firewood, and they get a solution for next 25 years for clean cooking, and they don't have to go to agency to fetch gas. So it's a standalone system, and which can be very helpful in hilly areas and in the remote areas, in the islands, and we're just hoping that solar storage costs would come down drastically in the years to come, so that people would have their own standalone solutions, and they will, and we may move towards a gridless globe, where I'll have solar panel on the top. I'll store energy for the night, and meet my household needs through the captive power.
It's a great vision. I think I'm a grid girl, though. I like the grid. No, I'm just something you just said was very interesting, though. You said that these solar home systems are very popular. I mean, adoption of rooftop solar home systems, microgrid experiences, there takes a good amount of public confidence that needs to be built in those systems. Do you think you've made headway? I mean, do you really believe that?
You know, in fact, you'll be surprised that I was, after taking charge as Secretary Renewable Energy, I moved to a small village in Uttar Pradesh. And to my surprise, solar panels were being sold at hardware shops. So what they do is they buy solar panels, and they have a small battery, and they charge that battery and meet their electricity demand during the night. So innovative solutions are coming up. People are charging their mobiles through solar panels. And so basically solar panels are providing you electricity. And then you can do anything what you're doing from the regular electricity you can do through the solar panels. So the only thing is that yes, solar and RE being distributed in nature, it can provide electricity independence in the remote areas. And as somebody was saying, that it can remove energy poverty from the globe, giving the independent solutions.
Great. Yes, sir.
Arun Sharma from the IFC. So, one of the questions, this is not really an IFC question. We are one of the biggest investors in RE in India, as you know, and also, you may not know, but we also did the first private sector green bank, Tata Clean Tech, which was my project 5 years ago. And the only mistake I made was I didn't put enough equity in. But I think after your talk, we're going to at least put 10 times more equity into that, given the business we have. Yeah. But the question I had was on we've also done a solar cooking stove project with Seva earlier, many years ago. And it was not so successful because of the quality of the cooking stove. So one of the suggestions I have is that it is because the users are not very sophisticated, the people from the village. So the ability to maintain quality on all these products, whether it's the panels, the inverters that go with the panels, because we also financed a solar pump program for Seva in the Rann of Kutch now, which is very, very successful. Purely private sector funded. We didn't take 1 penny from the government. And it's going extremely well. It's a blended finance program that we structured. We was already rolled out to 1,000, and now we have underwritten the entire community. But they're running around trying to find borrowers from us. But so these are all, very promising initiatives, but the challenge is the operational one. Money is not an issue. There are lots of people willing to finance these things, but maintaining quality and the after-sale service and the ability of these poor people to be able to use them consistently in harsh environments is a real challenge that we'll all face. And that's something that we need to find a way to have a permanent solution around that. And that's one of the things that we've set up the Green Bank that we did, is to make it a knowledge bank as well as a financing bank. So that's going to be our focus. And last quick comment was that the challenge we have been given by a lot of our stakeholders is when we look at putting solar pumps on a very wide scale, and we kind of take some credit in the success of the solar pump story with our project and its success, that now the government is scaling it up to 2.75 million, and we've just financed only just a few thousand, is that it has potentially an impact on the water table. There is an argument that is being made that says that because diesel is costly, farmers limit the use of the pump to the amount of water they actually need. And because solar is going to be literally free, and so there may be less responsible use of water when it comes to the individual farmer. And given the challenge we have, as we all know, with the water table in India, especially in the northern states, that's an issue, I think, that somehow needs to come into the policy calculation. That's just, I want to limit my comments to that.
All right. Okay, let me take your first question. First question is regarding the quality and maintenance. And I quite agree with you that earlier the system integrators were supplying poor quality of pumps, poor quality of solar panels, and fairly often taking the farmers for ride, and they not getting the quality for money. But in our recent tenders, what we have done is that we have made it mandatory for the supplier to give a guarantee, whether the solar lighting systems or the pumps, to give the maintenance for 5 years. So he would be mandated to give maintenance of the solar pumps for 5 years, one. Number two, we have also mandated that anybody who is supplying power, he has to have a service station in the district where he is going to supply the solar pumps or the solar lights. Suppose we got A, B, and C vendors. So A would be given one area where he would be having his service stations, and also in case of any thing going wrong. And then we have got a maintenance contract for 5 years. And in case we find that the quality has been totally substandard and we are getting too frequent complaints, then we can blacklist them. And the third thing what we have done is we have mandated for the suppliers to have a helpline, because the farmer cannot go and locate the service stations. So we have mandated now that anybody who supplies pumps or who supplies solar lights must have a helpline helping the beneficiary. So this is your first question. Second is you're talking about that if the solar pump is given, then the farmer would be drawing water more often, and he won't be conserving water, right? That's the question we're getting. That's the question you're getting. So as the grid expansion would take place, the farmer would be interested in selling and exporting power to the grid rather than overdrawing power, water. And that will result in conservation of water. Even today, when electricity is free or highly subsidized, the farmer can draw more water and misuse water. So nobody is going to stop him. But then the advantages of standalone solar irrigation system or the grid connected irrigation system is going to be much more. And then awareness is coming in. People are going into drip irrigations. Not everybody is interested in flooding his field with water. So with that kind of awareness, so this is where all of us become relevant. Let's create awareness. Let's teach the farmer that he should not overdraw water. Let him use his captive power not only for irrigation, but also for doing other household use, for cutting the fodder, for example, for running the floor mill. And today there are different kind of controllers which are available, and these controllers can be used along with the solar panels and solar inverters. And the solar panels which you are going to give to the farmer will be not only for irrigation, but a composite system for the household use per se, right? So that electric power he can draw for lighting his house, for using floor mill, whatever. Mm-hmm.
Some sort of awareness creating package for
Yes.
multi-use or conservation.
Multi-use.
I think will be very helpful.
True.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, any other questions? Yes, ma'am?
I have one more. I'm just curious.
Just wait for the mic.
I'm just curious. So in the schemes where you work with the state governments, if any state has a demand for a new renewable generator, do you help them, or what's the percentage of states that get, or projects that you support, that the federal government supports?
It depends on the state to state. And if a particular state wants to buy renewable energy power on their own, power from renewable energy sources, they can do so. And if they want to buy through the federal government institution, they can do so. But most of the states, because of the better credit ratings of the federal government institutions, do give their demand to the federal government. And then we aggregate the demand, and when we aggregate demand, we get better prices. So there are 3 states, suppose Rajasthan and Gujarat and Orissa. So if they individually go for tenders, they may go for 500 megawatt each. But if I am taking the demand, then I would be going for tender for 1,500. So whenever you aggregate demand and put it for bid, the rates, what you get for a new economy of scale is better. So that's why people, the states do go through the through the institutions of the federal government.
Okay, I'm going to take the prerogative as the person sitting up here with a microphone and ask the last question, which I get a lot. And so, because a lot of our program deals with oil and gas markets, and there's a lot of interest in what is driving electric vehicle policy in India. Is it commercial competitiveness? Do you want to sell a lot of EVs? Do you want to, sort of create a battery market or create battery manufacturing capability that you're selling other places? Is it for, reduction of petroleum consumption? And if so, how quickly do you think you're going to be able to get it? Right. Sort of like that question, right? Check the box of all the reasons. How should, because to be quite candid with you, some of the targets are as outlandish and pie in the sky as some of the renewable energy targets, and you're making some good progress on those. So people in the sort of oil and gas sector are looking at that and going, wow, that could be really transformative, because they expect a huge amount of transportation fuel demand to be coming from India. And so how can you just talk a little bit about the EV policies and what's concrete versus aspirational?
What we plan is by 2022 around 6 to 7 million electric vehicles. Mm-hmm. And obviously success of electric vehicles would depend on storage and how competitive storage. Today, if you see the major cost on electric vehicle is because of the battery. Mm. And but we have started producing electric vehicles. There are 2 companies in India, Mahindra and Tata. They are manufacturing cars, and we are not only we are going to have electric scooters, electric auto rickshaws, and various kind of transportation. In fact, you'll be surprised that we started running a few boats in Varanasi on electric power. So what we did was we charged batteries. And then the boatman comes and he hires that battery, runs his boat, comes back again, and
What kind of boat? Like a fishing boat or like
no, the passenger boat.
Oh, passenger boat.
So
Oh,
earlier
okay.
the passenger
Ferry,
boat was being run on diesel, and it was polluting the area. So we started this pilot project, and we charge battery from the regular line, and in fact you can charge battery through the solar panels also, and we give these batteries. They run boats on batteries, and it is much cheaper than using diesel. So we are not only concentrating on cars, we are concentrating on two-wheelers and the three-wheelers. And as I said that, yes, storage is going to hold the key. And we are concentrating, therefore, for success of not only electric vehicles, but also for RE sector per se, on Make in India storage. And we are going to ensure that storage happens in India, one, by creating the demand. The storage is not going to happen unless you create huge demand for this. Again, upscaling the thing. So now we have started coming out with the tenders for buying solar energy. So not solar energy, but renewable energy, along with storage. So we are saying, okay, I want X unit per day of RE energy during the peak hours, and during the non-peak hours, it would be X plus Y. So I ensure that I get the peak demand is also met through storage. You can have solar energy during the daytime. So X units are there. The developer puts X plus Y. He saves Y and stores, and Y he supplies to me in the evening. So we are creating demand by adding storage to our purchases, and we are also creating demands for EVs. So we are going to facilitate Make in India storage. One, as I said, through the demand. Number two, through our phased manufacturing policy, which would be backed by tariff and non-tariff barriers. So initially there will be 0% custom duty, but then in the years to come it will increase to 5%, 15%, 20%, and we'll ensure that whatever is being in India is of the required standard also.
Well, that's great. Listen, you've been extremely generous with your time. We have learned a lot in a very short period of time. We could probably continue doing this for several hours because of so much going on. But I just want to say on behalf of Rick and all of us here at CSIS, your friends, it's really wonderful to have you here. Thank you very much for sharing all of your thoughts with us.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much.